Imagine being born into a world where your first breath is said to fulfill a prophecy. A child hidden in the valleys of Kohala, protected by whispers of destiny, watched carefully because seers declared he would change history. That child was Kamehameha. But how did this hidden child rise to command warriors, topple rival chiefs, and unify an entire archipelago into one kingdom? Today, you'll see how prophecy, belief in mana, and strategy shaped him into Hawaii's great unifier. If you want to understand Hawaiian pride and power, you're in the right place. What if an entire people believed that a newborn carried the destiny of islands on his shoulders? That belief is what shaped the story of Kamehameha. In Kohala, on the northern tip of Hawaii Island, seers spoke of a child who would one day bring all the islands under a single rule. To live under such a prophecy was both a gift and a danger. Much like a spark in dry grass, the knowledge of his birth spread quickly, and rival chiefs feared how this child might threaten their control. Because of this, the first years of his life were lived in secrecy. Imagine the risk. One ambitious rival could erase the prophecy with a single strike against the infant. His life depended on silence, remote valleys, and the loyalty of those who sheltered him. Prophecy might have promised greatness, but survival in those early years was anything but certain. Every cry could draw suspicion. Every visitor carried the risk of betrayal. This climate of tension gave his survival a deeper meaning. In Hawaiian thought, leaders were understood to carry mana, a spiritual force linked to divine favor and human strength. Many believed that his ability to withstand threats in infancy was proof of this mana. It was not just protection from guardians, but evidence that the gods had already placed their mark upon him. For native Hawaiians, mana was not abstract. It was felt in the body, in the land, and in the presence a person carried into every space. Those hidden years also tied him closely to the land of Kohala itself. Raised apart from the rivalries of court, he grew in an environment where the sea, cliffs, and winds shaped his character. Seclusion sharpened his strength and patience. As a boy, his world was not filled with ceremonies of power, but with lessons written in the soil and tides. That closeness to the land gave him an unshakable foundation of identity, something his rivals, who grew inside the politics of power, often lacked. Picture a youth practicing skills in isolation, knowing that eyes of destiny were upon him, not the watchful audience of chiefs, but the heavier watch of prophecy itself. He hit stones to strengthen his grip, wrestled with tasks of endurance, and grew steady beneath the banner of expectation. A child may not fully know prophecy, yet every small struggle carried weight, as if preparing him for a role larger than any single boy could grasp. When he finally returned to the court of Kalaniʻopuʻu, he did not arrive as a forgotten child. He entered as one shaped by survival and steady training. Here, instruction in warfare, the laws of society, and priestly rituals set him on the path to leadership. By then, many already read his survival as proof. To them, the prophecy was alive, and the young Kamehameha embodied both divine authority and human will. That sacred authority, however, would soon collide with rival chiefs who had their own ambitions, and prophecy alone would not guarantee him the throne. How does prophecy turn into power when rival chiefs refuse to step aside? That was the question facing Kamehameha when Kalaniʻopuʻu the ruling Aliʻinui, passed away. Leadership of the kingdom did not fall to him, but to Kiwalao, a rival from the same royal line. Kamehameha received guardianship of certain war gods, while Kiwalao held political authority. To some, this division already signaled tension, and it soon flared into open conflict. In native Hawaiian society, succession disputes were not rare. Power was connected to lineage, land, and the gods, which meant every change of leadership had the potential to spark rivalries. After Kalaniʻopuʻu's death, both Kiwalao and Kamehameha carried recognized claims. The difference was that one carried authority of position, while the other carried the weight of prophecy. The island soon watched these forces collide. Their struggle began with sharpened spears and chants of warriors gathering on the shoreline. Yet, unlike the stories that speak only of destiny, Kamehameha's early campaigns revealed hardship. His first clashes ended much like past Hawaiian battles, with cycles of retreat, regrouping, and losses that weakened both sides. Warriors fought with skill and resolve, but strategy often followed older patterns. At this stage, Kamehameha's rise seemed far from assured. This is where the story shifted. Foreign sailors had begun to reach Hawaii, bringing not only trade but also weapons and tangent tactics previously unseen. Among them were Isaac Davis and John Young, two men who became part of Kamehameha's inner circle. They helped translate the mechanics of firearms and cannons into methods his warriors could adapt. Where others saw strange tools, Kamehameha saw opportunity. Canoes that once carried spearmen across surf now carried heavy cannons, iron mouths ready to release thunder. It was a startling sight, ancient forms of transport reshaped into instruments of modern warfare. In this blend, old and new stood side by side. A line of warriors might stand with spears and clubs, followed closely by men armed with muskets, their sound breaking the rhythm of conch shells. The contrast was visible. Rivals who clung to familiar strategies, and Kamehameha who embraced transformation. That choice to combine traditions with new tactics marked the turning point of his campaigns. It was more than firepower. It was adaptation, the ability to take what arrived from abroad and weave it into Hawaiian ways of fighting. When his army sailed toward Maui, this hybrid method showed its true force. Against enemies who expected the rhythm of battle they had always known, Kamehameha's warriors answered with cannon fire that shook both land and sea. Prophecy did not place victory into his hands. The difference came from how he turned vision into practice, reshaping his resources and seizing each new advantage. Strategy plus innovation gave him an edge that rivals could not match, pushing him closer to dominance across the islands. But material strength was only part of the story. Ahead lay another test: how to claim not only by force but also by sacred right that he was meant to rule. Uniting islands was never only a matter of weapons or armies. To rule in Hawaii meant carrying the sanction of the gods. And for Kamehameha, this balance between force and ritual shaped the next stage of his rise. At the heart of this moment stood Puʻukoholā Heiau, the great temple constructed on the slopes of Kohala. Its stones were not laid just for ceremony. Each stone was carried by hand, passed from person to person across long chains, linking communities through labor. The temple was dedicated to Ku, the god of war, and through this act, Kamehameha aligned his conquest with divine authority. For his supporters, this was proof that his campaign was not simply about human ambition, but also about fulfilling prophecy. Yet the drama of prophecy needed more than stone walls. Kamehameha extended an invitation to his rival Keōua, drawing him to the heiau. This was no ordinary visit. His presence became a final act of sacrifice that fused politics with ritual. For those watching, the moment carried more than the silence of defeat. It revealed a transfer of power that bore a religious weight. Conquest, framed through this act, was cast as divine will carried out by human hands. That fusion of politics and spirituality reinforced the idea that Kamehameha was not only a victorious general, he was the embodiment of prophecy itself. His victories became sacred stories as much as military records, and each campaign carried a sense of inevitability. With the backing of coup and the weight of ritual, his rule absorbed the contours of the sacred. Even so, the wars continued. On Oahu, his army met fierce resistance in the valley of Nuʻuanu. It is here that a moment etched itself deep into Hawaiian memory. Warriors were driven toward the cliffs, and in desperation some were forced over the edge. The steep drop, combined with the clash of bodies and weapons, created an image still recalled today. A battle where victory and tragedy stood side by side, carved into the landscape itself. Alongside these campaigns, Kamehameha's vision extended to diplomacy. He cultivated ties with foreign envoys, especially the British, recognizing that international alliances offered more than temporary advantages. These relationships provided material support, but also showed a leader who could balance the sword with statecraft. To the outside world, he presented not only as a warrior, but as a monarch in dialogue with global powers. After unification, his leadership shifted toward peace and order. One key gesture was the law of the splintered paddle. It declared that defenseless people, travelers, the elderly, even children, must be protected from harm. The story behind this law linked back to his own experience as a younger warrior, but its enforcement carried symbolic weight. It marked a transition from the violence of sheep conquest to the responsibilities of governance. Through warfare, ritual, diplomacy, and law, Kamehameha became more than a conqueror. He blended mana, legal authority, and sacred sanction into real unity. That foundation carried forward beyond his lifetime, shaping Hawaiian identity in ways still felt today. Kamehameha's story shows that his rise was never just about victory in battle. It was prophecy carried into action, foreign tools reshaped into Hawaiian warfare, and law turned into protection for his people. Power became unity because it joined mana, strategy, and vision. When you reflect on his path, you see how native Hawaiian sovereignty was built on both resilience and sacred trust. It is a reminder of what true leadership means. Subscribe for more history and culture explained with care. His legacy endures as a living symbol of Hawaiian pride and aloha ainia today.